Hi, and welcome to our relational series called One Another, where we look at how we relate with one another. We're looking at 6 one another's in the book of Ephesians. It's actually a little word in Greek, allalon, that's a reciprocal pronoun, and that's translated as one to another or one another. It's important because everything in our lives gets shaped by repetition, especially human relationships, right? We fall into familiar patterns with one another. Just think about how your parents fight or how you behave with your siblings or your partners. One time doesn't change much, but if you repeat a pattern often enough between the two of you, that pattern becomes a culture that you have shaped. And then in turn, that culture ends up shaping you. This is so important in your life because culture determines what kind of relationship you'll have with your family, with your boyfriend, girlfriend, spouse, children, workplace, church, friendships. If you're kind to one another, that cycle will produce more and more kindness. If you hate one another, if you're mean to one another, it will produce more of that. Why are there such big global problems in the Middle East or wars? I think it's because 100,000 cycles have gone back and forth so much between one another that no one can even agree on where the starting point was. Just try and change things that have been established into culture and you'll discover that once it's baked in, it's so hard to change. That's why Paul, at the beginning of when the church is starting up in Christianity, Paul talks about this as he introduces the one another's. He highlights that we are not just to live out our calling. He doesn't say, hey, you're called to be a Christian. Live out your calling to be a parent, a spouse, a worker, a minister, a friend. No. He urges us to pay attention to the way or the manner in which we live out what we're called to do. In Ephesians 4, 1-2, he says, I therefore, a prisoner for the Lord, urge you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling to which you have been called, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love. It's like we have to pay attention to our manners. What kind of manner will we adopt? Paul lists key virtues, right? Like humility, gentleness, patience. These aren't personality traits. They're choices that we make. They're the manners of the Christian walk. So let's begin our series by thinking, what kind of culture are we going to create by our interactions with one another? If we leave it by ourselves, the world's culture will take over, right? I mean, we're moving at a faster pace now. So nowadays, you get irritated when one of your friends doesn't reply a message that you sent them very fast. 20 years ago, you'd have to wait by the phone for them to call, and that might be ages. Things nowadays are also more suited to us, right? So we can customize the channels we watch, we can get the food that we want to eat. And so I think because everything suits us now, we get more irritated when things don't go our way. We're less able to bear with one another. I think we bear with one another less nowadays. We're less willing to bear with other people's failings, their idiocy, their slowness, their personality, their quirk, their weakness. It just seems like in this world where there are so many options, every other option is a little bit irritating. But the Bible says, bear with one another in love. It's not just something that we do personally ourselves, but it's something that we're supposed to do as a group. That instruction is to a whole church, the whole group. Between us, as we interact with one another, we must bear with one another in love. Giving a good turn or giving good turns is actually a great way to practice bearing with one another. Establishing a culture where you start a cycle not of demanding a good turn or making your own turn good, but rather intentionally honoring the other person, bearing with them and saying, hey, I'm going to give you a good turn so that you know what it looks like as we lean in to what life looks like for you. We do that here at FGA. We have different worship leaders that come on, and when they worship lead, we give them a good turn to lead in the way that God has called them to lead. We honor the different generations here at FGA, and we lean in and we give each generation a good turn. We honor the different ministries and we give them a good turn. It doesn't always suit everybody to have the youth running service and the music's really loud, but we give them a good turn. At the same time, we'll have our seniors and we will give them a good turn. One of the things I think I like about FGA is that so much emphasis is on being physically present and doing relationships together. When you are present in a relationship, you essentially give a good turn, because you basically said, hey, my day, my agenda is now going to be subject to whatever happens here. You're giving it a really good go by being physically there, tied to whatever happens in that dynamic. So I love these examples actually of how we can kick off bearing with one another by starting a good turn, which hopefully will kick off another good turn. I love that this practice is a voluntary thing. I think Paul, he's trying to show us a better way to live. It's a proactive act that sets the tone for the kind of culture that then shapes the manner in which we will live out our calling. I hope in this beginning first session in our relational series, you have a great discussion about what it's like to begin one another cycles and to start by giving good turns as we bear with one another in love.